Welcome to My Morning Cup, a podcast produced by Costa Media Advisors and brought to you by the generous support of the Tennessee Valley Authority. To learn more about TVA's impact on our community, follow TVA on Instagram at TVA and on Twitter X at TVA News. My Morning Cup, where we have interesting conversations with genuine people. I'm Mike Costa, your host. My guest this week is Thom Benson. Thom is the Vice President, Chief Communications and Marketing Officer for the Tennessee Aquarium. Before showing up at the aquarium, Thom was showing up in living rooms across Chattanooga as the morning meteorologist on WRCB TV. Thom, before we find out what is more stressful, flying through the eye of a hurricane or navigating your way through hundreds of school-aged kids at the aquarium, let me ask, what's in your morning cup?
Well, generally it's Diet Coke.
Oh, you're a Diet Coke guy.
I am.
A few of you out there.
Yeah. And that's, kind of my morning routine. However, when I do enjoy coffee, it's usually an iced coffee with a little bit of cream, maybe some caramel in it.
So you're not anti-coffee? Because most of the Diet Coke folks I know are like, I just never got a taste for it.
Well, I think my problem was I drank too much coffee, both in college and early mornings at different TV stations across the country. When you get up at 3 o'clock in the morning to go on air at 5 o'clock, it needs a little octane to get in the tank before you get going.
I bet you miss that, don't you?
It was the one reason that I left television was, really it's those early morning shifts in particular, as you know, are interesting for a number of reasons. One, you're really helping people start their day. Mm-hmm. Two, you're understaffed. If something goes wrong, you don't have engineers in the building, you don't have extra producers and other technical folks behind the scenes to help prop you up. So it's really, as Tom Toller, our general manager over at Channel 3 used to say, you're sort of the elite fighting force for the station because it's a small group of people that are working very seamlessly together to make that happen every day.
That's a great way to put it. You were that force that went in ahead of the big guns to make sure everything got set up right.
Yeah, and again, for me personally, it was nice knowing that the forecast would help somebody plan their day.
Yeah.
For me, it was always really awe-inspiring whenever I would get a call from a landscape guy or somebody pouring concrete and say, hey, you saved me a bunch of money today because you said it was going to rain. I held off on the concrete pour. Or I was able to take all my equipment into the shop and do the preventative maintenance because I knew I wasn't going to be able to cut grass or, take care of lawns and things like that. So I think that it was the thing that really kept me going was knowing that I was able to help somebody plan their day. Yeah.
And, one of the things I always heard about the morning show, the morning news is that you want it to win every day part, but you really want it to win mornings because if you could be with someone when they start their day, you're going to be with them throughout the day.
Hopefully.
In terms of viewing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, welcome. I'm glad you're here.
It's good to be here.
We've had a couple of aquarium people.
Yeah.
And we always, the aquarium holds a special place in Chattanooga because it really, in a lot of people's opinions, and it's true, kick-started so much of what happened in Chattanooga. And I do want to talk about that, but I want to start where I always start, is the beginning.
Okay.
You grew up in a very small town, Morrison, Illinois, huh?
Yeah, I tell people often that when I finally left Morrison, the population was 4,600. I looked in the rearview mirror and saw them repainting the sign to 4,599. But it was a great town to grow up in, and you say that in reflection. But as a young person, there wasn't much opportunity there for me. And so, leaving town was, my path after graduating from college. So it was a wonderful place to grow up. I was very fortunate that we had relatives on both sides of the family that were farmers. And so we had the opportunity to, see them caring for livestock and planting crops and going through the whole cycle of, harvest and planting, and having an understanding that when you had the family gatherings on Thanksgiving, some of them left pretty early after, eating Thanksgiving because they had chores to do. And my dad grew up on a farm. And so I think it was nice to be in touch with that part of the family that lived off the land, really. And it was a small enough town where there were a lot of natural areas growing up where I spent a lot of time in the woods and the creek and, around ponds and the lake at the state park.
What part of Illinois?
It's in the northwest corner.
Okay.
It's right on Route 30. It's about 130 miles west of Chicago. If you're familiar, it's about halfway between Rockford and Moline.
Okay.
I was born in 1965, the year of the Great Flood.
Oh, yeah.
My mom was somewhat concerned that she was going to be able to make it to the hospital because at the time, prior to my arrival, they were actually, ferrying people across in ducks.
Well, and speaking of your arrival, you were one of 5, but there's a 19-year spread between you and the oldest.
Yeah. So the 2 oldest brothers, my oldest brother, Dick, was on an aircraft carrier off the coast of Vietnam when I was born. My second oldest brother enlisted in the Air Force a couple years later. He graduated the year I was born. So about 2 weeks after I was born, he walked across the stage and graduated high school. But he served in Vietnam in the Air Force. And then there was the 3 of us, Phil, Mary, and myself, that were in the house later.
Yeah. And what's the age difference on those final 3?
So my sister is 5 years older, and my middle brother is 7 years older.
So you didn't have a whole lot of time as an only child, being the youngest, the only one left in the house.
No, not really. I mean, it was sort of two families that my parents raised.
Yeah. And growing up, where you did in Morrison and so much to do outside, is that kind of what birthed your love of all things nature? And
yeah, I like to think so. I think that my mom fostered a lot of that. I can remember as early as some of my earliest memories were her just taking me by the hand and walking me around the house. We had Lily of the Valley and Jack of the Pulpit, and rabbits that nested under the Lily of the Valley, back by the back porch. And I think that that and my dad was an interesting guy in a lot of different ways, but one of which was, I think he had a love of nature that was probably manifest more later in life when he had the ability to spend more time, out doing things rather than working hard to support the family.
Well, and speaking of working hard, and your dad, you mentioned that he had a machine shop, so you learned a lot of.
Well, I didn't learn a lot. I learned a little bit, but I think what I learned was that, and I think my dad recognized it, that wasn't for me.
Mm-hmm.
And my brothers, took to it like geese to water. And we're all extremely talented with, working with their hands. And my middle brother, Phil, is an excellent machinist like my dad was, and welder. My oldest brother was a fantastic welder. And I mean, just artistic. I mean, if you could see the beads that they would lay down when they were welding, I mean, it was really art. And my dad did some sculpting.
Did he really?
And it was, through welding. And some of the things that he did to repair items was very artistic. Tractor pulls were a big thing in the Midwest. And so occasionally you'd have one of these guys who would come in with a tractor and the engine had blown up and he had all the pieces in a box. And my dad could, put that engine back together and it looked like a cobweb when you saw the beads, but he was able to do that. And for someone who had an 8th grade education, he enlisted in the Navy and learned a trade there. He was a machinist mate. And when he came back, he went into business with another guy and eventually bought him out and started the machine shop. And he built boats and just a lot of really incredible things for somebody who, he read a lot and sort of was self-taught.
Yeah, it's a self-made man.
Yeah, I think so.
Were your parents from Morrison or
that area?
That area.
I mean, there were smaller towns around there that they lived in.
Yeah. And what would you do? What would you do for fun at home? I mean, were you playing sports?
I was not athletically gifted. In middle school, I joined the wrestling team. I think there's still a record that's on the books for the fastest pin time, and that was me getting laid out on the mat because I was in the lightest weight division. I was sort of had long legs, and these shorter guys who are stockier and more muscular could really shoot the legs and.
Isn't that a miserable sport, though? I mean, I'm sorry, all the wrestlers out there. I did wrestling for about 15 minutes, and I said, I don't want to do that.
It was good. I think being involved in team athletics is important. I got involved with athletics through video, actually. The art teacher had one of the first reel-to-reel videotape cameras, and I think he was thinking about doing some art projects, but it ended up turning into videotaping the basketball games. And so I was asked if I would, help with that. So when I got to high school, the athletic director knew that I had this aptitude for running video equipment, and they wanted somebody to video the football games. So every Friday I was carrying this huge deck across the football field and up into the crow's nest and attaching that 3-tube camera to the there was a galvanized pipe that sort of sat at an angle. So when you shot the end zones, it had this Batman angle where the field was actually tilted terribly. Oh, it never would have made air in a television world. But that's how I, got to know the players and kind of hung out with the team through video.
Is that what gave you the TV bug?
Well, yes. I wouldn't say that I knew that's what I wanted to do, but when it came to, choices in college, it was like, I kind of like doing this.
Yeah.
Northern Illinois University had a good communications program. They had a campus TV station, a campus radio station. And so, I sort of fell into it naturally.
But as a kid growing up, I know you did a lot of different things. You did a lot of different things for your dad in the machine shop. And I can understand not having the aptitude because I'm in a similar situation where my two older brothers really enjoyed the family business. And I was like, yeah, this ain't for me.
Yeah, I wish I would have paid more attention. If I could have a talk with, 14 or 15-year-old Thom, I think I would say, hey, this is something that you're going to wish you knew more of.
Pay attention.
Yeah. I probably hurt my brother's feelings at one point when he was trying to teach me something, and I told him, I'm not going to learn this. But I think that was, my attitude as a teenager in those years. And I think he's, forgiven me since then. But I think my dad really recognized that. And so when, you're not going to do nothing was sort of his mantra. So, I went to work at a restaurant there in town. And
that's what I was going to ask you. What were some of the other things that you did?
So I washed dishes there for a very short period of time. And
fellow dishwasher.
Did bus boy for a little bit. Worked at the local dime store, worked at the grocery store. And then when I went into college, I had the opportunity to work at a hardware manufacturing company. And I worked 2 summers there before I started doing summer schools and internships at TV stations.
Any common trait in there with those different jobs that you took away from them?
I think that all of it, including working with my father and my father's sort of role modeling was, hard work will pay off.
Yeah.
And I think when people say, gee, I was lucky, I think people don't give themselves enough credit oftentimes that, yes, there are forks in the road that happen. And frequently you choose one and that tends out to be the right one. Maybe it's not. But I think you're always, if you're working hard and applying yourself, those opportunities come up. And I was very fortunate to have good mentors along the way at every step that were, either encouraging me or helping shape behaviors to be a better employee.
So as you're doing these jobs in the summer, comes time to go to school. Northern Illinois has a program that you like. Were you already a lover of weather and outdoors, and that attracted you to that, or were you just interested in video and broadcasting?
I think it was both, but I never saw myself having the opportunity to go in front of the camera. And so behind the camera was the way to get involved. The upper Midwest has some really dynamic weather, everything from, blistering droughts and heat waves to, incredible winter storms. And we went through some
And you're
major
up on that
ones.
Minnesota border area.
Wisconsin. So,
See, it shows you I know my geography. I paid such great attention.
Yeah, northeast Iowa, southwest Wisconsin, almost, it's a little bit of a drive to get to the extreme southeast corner of Minnesota. But Northern Illinois, it can get really cold.
Yeah.
We can have, severe weather. And this is interesting too, Mike, because severe weather is different in different parts of the country. And by that, I mean pea-sized hail in Northern Illinois is a bigger deal than pea-sized hail in Texas.
And why is that?
Because if you've got cornfields out there, pea-sized hail can shred the leaves and destroy your crop. Whereas in Texas, one time when I was first at the TV station in Abilene, I went to the chief meteorologist and hey, we got a report of, marble-sized hail over in Sweetwater. And he takes a piece of paper and he throws it in the trash and he says, come back to me when it gets to be golf balls. Golf ball or bigger was, sort of the threshold there. Anything below that is sort of a typical, spring day in West Texas.
Yeah.
But in Illinois, it's a different story because of the damage that it can do to crops.
I don't think everyone realizes what a rural state Illinois is, with the exception of Chicago, really.
Yeah, Chicago is the 800-pound gorilla, and everything else is downstate, which used to drive me crazy because I was just a bit, geographically, we were upstate too, but we were outside of the metro area for sure.
Talk a little bit about your college years at Northern Illinois.
It was a great campus at the time, and I think perhaps today it was the second largest university in Illinois. So there were a lot of students who were from the Chicago area, and some of them, would leave on weekends and go back home. So the population varied quite a bit.
And what town is it?
DeKalb, Illinois,
okay,
which is about 70 miles west of Chicago. So it was roughly halfway between home and Chicago. But it, it's out in the middle of the cornfields too. DeKalb Pfizer Genetics, it's the home there. So, the DeKalb corn signs are all over the place. And the wind in the winter, starts in South Dakota and doesn't stop until it gets to Chicago. So, we would have some pretty cold winters, and you sort of learned how to navigate the campus through the building so you didn't have to go out in the cold and snow.
Sounds lovely.
Yeah, again, it's a beautiful historic campus. I love that school, and it was a great time to be there, and I had some wonderful opportunities there.
So you go in, you pick a communications degree, and that was born out of what you were doing in high school, of doing some videotaping and saying, hey, I think I want to learn more about this.
Right. And again, what are the opportunities to get involved?
Yeah.
So the campus TV station was one. There was a local cable outlet that had sort of the meteorology students did a weathercast there. There was a small newscast there. There was a newscast on campus. There was an NPR station, not unlike WUTC. It was WNIU, and they broadcast to DeKalb and Rockford. So they had a pretty good size audience and went into the Chicago suburbs. And they had a radio reading service for the visually impaired, the Northern Illinois Radio Information Service, NIRIS. And I would go in there and volunteer, and you read newspapers and publications to the audience that was listening. And it was their way of keeping up with the news because they couldn't read traditional newspapers. And a lot of those papers at the time did not have an edition that was in Braille. Mm-hmm. And there wasn't the technology that's available now for readers and things that would help be adaptive and help them get that information. So it was really interesting. And occasionally you'd get a phone call from one of the listeners, and we would have conversations. And once or twice I would go over to somebody's house and read their mail to them.
Would you really?
And it was a really neat experience. And when the director of that program had an opportunity to leave, he asked me, would you consider applying for my position? And I called my dad and I said, look, I don't know what to do here, because there's a part of me that thinks this is a nice opportunity, but there's also a part of me that realizes if I take this job, I probably won't finish my degree.
Yeah.
Because this is going to take all of my time. And my dad kind of laughed and he said, I can't make that decision for you.
It's a smart dad.
But you will make the right choice. Yeah. And at that time, I said no, and was grateful that I had the offer, mm-hmm. but it wasn't the right time.
Yeah, it probably would have kept you from going on and doing more.
Well, again, it's one of those forks in the road, and for me, it was turned out to be the right fork.
That had to be good training for you for what you eventually ended up doing by being on air.
I think when you look at some of the broadcasters in our area, uh-huh. that David Carroll's a good example. Radio guy first, and you deliver the news, you're reading copy, you are ad-libbing on the air. And so when it comes to breaking news in particular, a guy like David Carroll is unflappable. Yeah. Because he's sort of seen and done it all. And so I think you're right. I think that when you're, it's like anything else, it's muscle memory. And mm-hmm. when you're, reading and delivering content, it becomes more natural.
I'll move on from this, but I'm curious, did you choose that or volunteer to do that because you thought it was a worthy thing to help people with, or
it was both.
It
was both. It was an opportunity to get my foot in the door at the radio station. I had a jazz show once a week, and I probably wasn't very good at that, but it was fun.
Yeah.
And the news department had some really good radio journalists at the time. Some of them went on to very illustrious careers in broadcasting and TV later on. So I had the opportunity to see them at work and see how they covered stories, and it opened doors at the campus TV station. I did a little bit with the cable station, and there was a reporter at the ABC affiliate in Rockford, Scott Steele, who didn't like to shoot stories, but back.
A reporter not liking to shoot stories?
This was long before multimedia journalists. Yeah. We were one-man bands back then, and the equipment was a lot heavier and a lot more complicated than it is today.
Yeah. You had a separate sound recorder.
But I shot some stories for Scott when he would be down in DeKalb on weekends, and I think Scott would buy a 6-pack of beer for me for helping him out or whatever. And when we had an opportunity in one of our journalism classes, the news director from the CBS station came in and was critiquing tapes, and I had submitted a couple of pieces that I shot for Scott, and he pushed the pause button on the machine and he looked around the class. He said, "Who shot this?" And I raised my hand and he says, "Talk to me after class." And when I talked to him, he said, I knew that somebody was shooting Scott's stuff because it looked good. He said, "Scott's a good reporter, but he can't shoot worth a darn." And he said, would you like to intern at WIFR? And so I was like, "Yeah, that's great." So then that turned into a part-time job.
So you got your first start interning at a local TV station, a commercial station.
Yes. Yeah.
And what led to your first full-time job? Was that WIFR?
No, but the news director, Jack Keefe, left. And that was another, he called me a month or so after he left and said, "Hey, I've got an opening down here in Champaign." And I was like, "Jack, I want to finish my degree. I can't do that, but thanks. I really appreciate that." And he said, "Well, keep me in mind." And so I knocked on several doors. I still had about a year left, and I was looking for other internship opportunities. So I went down to the Quad Cities and knocked on some doors. I met the GM. He just happened to be going through the lobby when I was there.
So you physically went down, and I'm just trying to place this in terms of how it's different today. Yeah. That you traveled down to the Quad Cities, you found out where the TV stations are, you showed up at the reception desk and said, "Hey, can I speak to the news director?"
Yeah. And, only one of the three said no.
Yeah.
Come back. The other one, the news director at WQAD, Peggy Vinke at the time, was very gracious to open her door and, "Hey, I don't have anything right now, but keep me in mind because I may have something, that summer."
Do you think that would work today?
I'd like to think so, but I don't know. I
think it would work better because we're all so accustomed now that I'm going to find the email address. I mean, it's not even phone calls. I'm going to get the email address. I'm going to send an email. That I think if someone had the gumption to show up and say, "Hey, can I see Thom Benson?" that you're going to say, "I got to see this person." If you have the time that, they've taken the trouble.
And that's the way the GM was at the one TV station. He said, "He's not available, the news director, but let me talk to you."
Oh, wow.
And so he spent maybe 15 minutes with me, but it was meaningful.
It shows you GMs don't do anything.
No,
I'm speaking as a former GM.
But I think, Mike, you probably would have been the same way in that you saw somebody you would see somebody who was wanting a job and, as you say, showed some gumption and was willing to spend 15 minutes just say, "Here's what you need to do." And that was great because it gave me a path forward and kept me going. It gave me, hope that I can do this at some point.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned you were behind the camera at this point in your career. Yeah. So you go down the Quad Cities, you speak to him. What does all this lead to after he speaks to you, and what was your plan?
So when I finally got to graduation, but prior to that, there was a broadcasting convention in St. Louis, and they sort of had a speed dating thing, career fair. And CNN had a table about this size, and there was a cardboard box that everybody was dropping their resumes in, and it was a big cardboard box. And
because CNN was hot at the time.
By the time I got there, the box was almost full, and the recruiter was asking everybody what they wanted to do. And of course, a lot of these students were like, well, I want to be, on the air. And of course she said, well, let me
adjust your sights.
Yeah. And when she got to me, I at the time wanted to, shoot news, and I wanted to be in one of their foreign bureaus because I thought it would be
makes sense.
Exciting to be in a hot zone where there was actually, some kind of live fire going on.
Oh, wow.
Which, 60-year-old Thom would also have another conversation with 20-year-old Thom.
I guess Morrison was not that exciting.
Yeah, but they had bureaus all over the world at that time, and they were really, expanding. And so just before graduation, because I had done the work at the campus station and NIRIS and the TV station and had an internship and part-time work, I had some experience. And so I got a phone call from CNN offering a job as a video journalist, which, the VJs were hired in classes. We joked about it, being the college news network, because you would all come on the floor at the same time and you go through this training program where you ran teleprompter, floor directed, and, helped with
touch
scripts.
Everything.
Yeah. So I was on the floor the first day at CNN Center, the first broadcast, which was interesting because it was packed with a lot of people in suits, and we only had 2 floor cameras. And my job was to get the one camera on this flimsy temporary tripod from the news desk over to the weather set. And I only had like 90 seconds to do that. And as I'm pulling the cable and throwing it over my shoulder, I can see somebody blocking the way. And I was like, hey, get out of the way. And I hear this voice say, let's stand over here. We go through the half hour, and they went to New York for the next half hour of news, and everybody files out. And I see my supervisor coming through the newsroom behind the set, it had that glass window, and everybody was laughing. And it was Ted Turner that I told to get out of the way. So I had visions of, my career was going down the drain at that moment. But Joe said, no, that's actually the right move. Because,
I was going to say, he probably liked what you did.
Yeah.
Took charge and said, look, I got a job to do here. I don't care who you are.
Yeah.
Because Ted Turner was a I don't care who you are kind of guy.
Yeah. So anyway, that was my claim to fame.
So how does that grow your career?
Well, it was going to take a long time to get out in the field because it was a training program, and I already had experience, and I had a friend that worked at the ABC affiliate in Southern Illinois. And when I went up there, I left CNN and went up there, and they were starting a weekend newscast, and they only had like a 15-minute cut in that they were doing. They were going to expand to a full 30 minutes of news twice a day, twice a weekend, once on Saturday, once on Sunday. And they needed somebody to do the weather. And I sort of raised my hand. I said, I think I could do that. And the meteorologist sort of looked at me side-eyed and said, if you're going to do it, you're going to do it right. Let me teach you how to forecast. And Jim Razor was a great mentor and taught me how to, read the facts and put together the forecast. And we didn't have a weather computer. We downloaded the graphics from ABC and edited it together. But you had to know the weather to be able to prepare an actual forecast.
So you're becoming a meteorologist was not by accident, but because you raised your hand and said, well, I think I can do this. Because you hear from a lot of meteorologists of how they were, I was 9 years old and a tornado came through our town. I said, by golly, I'm going to learn the weather.
Well, we did have that. I mean, we had the big winter storms. We had one storm where we stood in my sister's bedroom and watched the big tree across the street go over. And that was a big windstorm that hit the city. Morrison, not a city, but, and we got in my dad's truck and went all over and, looked at all the trees that were down. And
so that kind of piqued your curiosity.
Yeah. I mean, again, weather is the one thing of a newscast that impacts everybody every day, every hour. Yeah. And so again, I think there was sort of that fascination with, wow, here's something that can bury you in snow, freeze your toes off, boil your skin, or, blow over everything in sight. So there was that interest, but having worked in TV stations and sort of hanging out in the Weather Center and chatting with the various folks, Flip Spiceland down at CNN was fun to hang around with, and had a good friendship with him, and Sue Morose at WIFR and some other folks. It was just, I learned a lot from them just sort of hanging out.
Is that when you decided that's going to be my career path?
If I ever had the opportunity, but it wasn't until Southern Illinois that, again, I had the chance to raise my hand and get started.
So how does that eventually get you to Chattanooga? Because that's where I first became aware of you and met you.
Yeah. So, before I left WSIL, Jim said, you're pretty good at this. You should go back to school to, get the solid training.
And there's not a lot of schools that do.
There wasn't, and Mississippi State had just started the broadcast meteorology program at that time. And so when I went to Abilene, I signed up for the MSU program and was among, and I don't remember how many years it had been going, but I was among one of the first classes that graduated. And there was a meteorologist from, I think it was from Spokane, who came down and sort of audited the program. Because back then there was sort of this big hullabaloo from the AMS meteorologist saying, oh, golly, look at these people aren't taking calculus. And I was not a math guy.
Yeah,
and
I'm with you.
Calculus would have, washed me out. But you had all of the meteorology. If you're a research meteorologist, the calculus and the advanced math is important. But if you are trying to provide an accurate forecast and deliver weather information to the public at large, you are better off having the training through a program like Mississippi State than just someone who is just placed in there as weather guy.
Did you have to go to campus for that, or was that a remote?
For the final, it was remote. The tests were proctored at the local weather service office, and then you went for a final project and the graduation. And I think that's kind of the model that they still use today, but I'm not sure.
So that took you on, that really launched your career doing weather.
Yeah, I had Jim Razor at WSIL was a great mentor. He grew up on a farm and was an agricultural meteorologist. And so I learned a lot about heating degree days, the dew points and a lot of pan evaporation rates, things that people don't use today.
Yeah.
But it gives you a very good basic understanding of some of the elements that are important for, crop growth and so forth. And then when I went to KTXS in Abilene, I worked under Jerry Eckhart, and Jerry was a severe weather expert. Jerry earned the gold medal from the Commerce Department for his service on what they called Terrible Tuesday, the big tornado that came through Wichita Falls, Texas in 1979. Jerry was the guy who sent the tornado warning just before they lost power, and Fort Worth, the weather service office that they reported to, didn't hear from that office for a couple of days because of the damage to the infrastructure back then.
Wow. How long were you in Abilene? 5.5
years.
And then what was it? Were you looking to move? How did Chattanooga get on your radar?
So a good friend of mine that I went to school with, Steve Lewis, who also said, hey, we got this job in Southern Illinois. I went up there 2 weeks later. He said, I'm out of here. I'm going to Chattanooga.
Thanks, Steve.
And so, it was fine. That was a great opportunity. Again, I was given the opportunity to go in front of the camera. Would have missed a lot if I hadn't had that opportunity. Texas was a different opportunity because there was a lot of severe weather there. And I, worked for a great meteorologist and learned a lot from him. They also had live capability, which WSIL did not have at the time. They got a satellite truck out there in West Texas, and that was, additional experience. So I had applied for one opening. I still have the rejection letter from Bill Wallace. I had applied a couple of years before I actually got the job. And then, Steve said, hey, we got another opening here. And so I applied the next time, and Bill brought me in for an interview.
What was that, to do mornings?
That was to do weekends.
Weekend?
Yeah. David Glenn was doing mornings, and Paul was doing the evenings.
Oh, yeah, David.
Weekends.
I forgot David did mornings and then went to Mobile.
Yep.
And so when he went to Mobile, you took over.
I was able to move into the morning position.
Talk about that morning meteorology position, and just how hard it is to train your body to get up at 3 a.m.
For me, it wasn't. I was sort of a morning person, but over time it was.
Yeah.
And I tell people all the time, it was sort of like the all-you-can-eat buffet with all your favorite foods. At some point, it's enough. Mm-hmm. And so for me, I loved the job, loved the company, loved the management, and it was a great opportunity. But I was tired all the time after doing that for a number of years. And I was there, I think, 12 and a half years, I think, somewhere in that neighborhood. So, and the first couple were on weekends, and then then mornings. So it sort of over time just sort of wears you down.
What were some of the big weather events you covered? And I'm eventually getting to the aquarium.
Yeah, well, Hurricane Opal was the first one. I was only on board for a couple of months when Opal came through. I moved here in July of 95, and Opal came through here in October of that year. And I was on the air when that thing started moving through here, and it was still a tropical storm when it got here. I remember, the first report of trees going down were on Mount Eagle, and that was about 11 o'clock that night. And of course, the higher elevations are going to be impacted with a system like that before it works its way down to the valley. And so I knew it was going to be a long night, and that was a big one. Right after I first got here, there was a big windstorm that took out a portion of what was then Lorette Marina, which is up on Island Cove, I think now. There was boats that were flipped and everything. That was pretty exciting. We had the earthquake the one morning where just as we were coming on the air, everything in the studio started shaking and the lights are, Jed and Latrice were, kind of wide eyed. And I had just been through an earthquake in Alaska. And so I was like, I think we had an earthquake. Let me do this weather hit and I'll check. And then we'll, come back. And, sure enough, it was that 5.2, 5.3. It was in northeast Alabama down around Fort Payne.
Yeah, we just had one, three
Not
months
too long ago?
Yeah. Because I was up that morning and I'm like, I think that was an earthquake.
The earthquake, yeah. So it was fun that morning because the newscast just automatically became earthquake coverage and people calling in and say, yeah, I felt it in Ringgold or I felt it in Cleveland or wherever.
Now, one of the things you did that I don't know if I could do, I pretty much doubt it. You flew on the Hurricane Hunter plane?
I had an opportunity. Yeah. So Dr. Bob Sheets, who was the head of the National Hurricane Center back in the day, and he was on all the network. He was the hurricane guy. He had an emphasis to raise awareness for inland residents because, coastal residents by that time, they knew, right? They knew the drill. When the watches were issued, people started moving. But it was inland with inland flooding where a lot of the deaths were occurring. And so what he was trying to do is raise awareness about inland flooding. So they would have the hurricane hunters visit different cities, and they did a static display at Dyess Air Force Base. And the wing commander was there. And I said, I'd love to fly with you guys sometime. He said, well, we take media. Here's my card. Just get on the list. And so I was on the list for a long time. Had one that was more in the Atlantic. Their forward base of operations were out of San Juan, Puerto Rico. So I couldn't really do that one. And so I had to throw my name back in the hat. And then finally I get this call. Your name came up. If you can meet us down at Keesler Air Force Base tomorrow, but you also have to get transportation back from Houston because we're going to be evacuating the base. So you'll fly out of Keesler and you'll land at Ellington Field in Houston. So I went into Bill Wallace's office and I said, look, this storm's probably going to affect us. This is the one. Yeah. So we went out to the Chattanooga airport. We rented a car. I called the place down in Biloxi and I said, what time can I leave the car here and not be responsible for it? And he said, if you get it to me by 7, it's my fault if something happens. If it's after 7, it's your fault if it gets swept into the ocean. So I said, that's great because we have to meet at the Air Force Base at 4 a.m. So we left Chattanooga, drove all the way down, got to the hotel room. The photographer and I got to the hotel room at like midnight, asked him for a wake-up call for 3 a.m. And we dropped the car off, and the PIO at the Air Force Base picked us up and took us to the base. So we flew out, and as we were leaving, the flight line was pretty empty. They were sandbagging and boarding the doorways. And we only got to go through the eye 3 times because they wanted, the Hurricane Center wanted us to explore the northeast quadrant to see how far the tropical storm winds extended from the eye, which we found out was 210 miles from the center. It was a big storm, and it was re-intensifying as we were going through it. The same crew had been out the week before when it was coming across Haiti and the Dominican Republic, and it had the stadium effect. So it was the full, I think it was like Cat 4 when it went through there. But Hurricane George, the name was retired. It was that bad. It did come on shore right there at Biloxi and then came up this way and delivered a lot of rain, a little bit of wind, but not.
So is the rattling as you're going through the wall as intense as I imagine? It's
funny because I've had worse commuter flights.
Really?
There were times when it was really smooth and a few times it was bumpy. It wasn't, it had an open eye. It did have an eye wall, but it had an open eye. So it was a little bit ragged when we went through it. There were 2 other crews. There was sort of the Swedish version of USA Today that was with us and a crew from CNN. And the flight crews would, jokingly take a white trash bag, and they would write CNN barf bag on there, WRCB barf bag, and had some fun. You had to wear the harness, which was inflatable, and here's the hole, and you climb up this ladder and go through the roof. If we end up in the water, don't pull the rings, otherwise you can't get out the hole. But so I raised my hand. It's like, what good will this do if we actually have to ditch? And he said, well, you'll basically be a cork bobbing around until, somebody can come get you. So,
oh, gosh.
Yeah. And it was a long day for my wife.
Yeah, I bet.
Because I told her I would call her, as soon as I got
and you had
on
kids
the ground.
At this time, didn't you?
Sure. Yeah. And Misty. And so when I landed, my sister-in-law picked us up because my brother lived in League City. She picked us up at Ellington Field, and I got to talking with her, and I forgot to call Sandy.
Oh, gosh.
She was a little bit.
And it's not like you had an iPhone and she could check your location.
Exactly, yeah. So
she's waiting to hear from you. You're out gabbing with your sister.
Yeah, I'm having dinner with my sister-in-law and my photog.
I now know why you left television. And speaking of which, the whole time you were at WRCB, you're volunteering as a scuba diver at the aquarium?
Yeah, I got certified because, again, I was looking for ways to connect with my two oldest brothers, and JP, my second oldest brother, had gotten recertified in scuba diving. He sent me these beautiful pictures of Hawaii reefs and sea turtles and things like that. And I thought, if I can get certified, maybe I can go scuba diving with him sometime. And my middle brother got certified too, and my brother-in-law and my nephew. We ended up going scuba diving one time in a quarry up in Illinois, but I found out that they had a volunteer scuba program at the aquarium. So I started volunteering, fell in love with the people in the mission, and, could really see, I had covered some of the things that they had done. I had the opportunity to travel to Houston when the aquarium sent some of their educators and husbandry staff to the Flower Garden Banks National Marine Sanctuary, which the big saltwater exhibit models at the aquarium. They went down there for a training mission and to dive the Flower Garden Banks National Marine Sanctuary to learn about it. So to be able to tell those stories and relate, here's the habitat that we've replicated. This is the end of the journey of freshwater from the mountains to the sea. This is one of the healthiest reef ecosystems. This is why taking care of the Tennessee River matters. It's good for us. It's good for all the aquatic life that's here. But, oh, by the way, all of our water is connected, and the Gulf is connected to all ocean basins. So whether it's penguins in Antarctica or, tropical fish in the Gulf or lake sturgeon here in the Tennessee River, it's all one system, and every drop is important.
It's a great point we don't always think about. I want to go back real quick on the scuba thing. You were interested because your two older brothers were scuba diving, right?
My second oldest
brother. Is that because they're trying to connect with that age gap to get to know them better, you think?
Yeah, it was because, again, they were pretty much out of the house.
Yeah. They were almost like a second set of parents. I mean, because they were that much older.
Yeah, to some degree. Yeah. And both of them lived, my oldest brother lived in Clinton, Iowa, which wasn't that far away. And we'd spent a lot of time visiting him, but my second oldest brother lived in Idaho for a while, and then Alaska. So again, I didn't have a lot of time with him, and we have since gotten a lot closer.
That's good.
In our adulthood than I was growing up, because again, there was sort of these two families. But and I had some opportunities to spend some time with my oldest brother, just the two of us, that I really cherish now that he's gone.
Yeah, I bet you do. So the scuba being the length, and you started volunteering at the aquarium. Were you one of the folks cleaning the windows or feeding the animals?
Yeah, we have,
or all the above?
We have about 170 volunteer divers.
Is it that many?
It is, because there are divers in the water at the aquarium 363 days a year. The aquarium's closed on Thanksgiving and Christmas. But the volunteer divers really help maintain the exhibits and feed some of the animals in the River Journey building. And they also have an eye up close on the animals. So if they observe an animal that may be injured or appears to be behaving erratically or abnormally, they can report that to our staff, and then they can go in and help that animal to the surface.
And you probably know the animals pretty good after you've been in the tank.
Yeah, you know their behaviors and their actions, and so again, it's extra eyes on the animals in our care.
So you're morning meteorologist. You guys are doing well. RCB and TVC are fighting it out #1 day by day at a time, and things are pretty good. Why move to the aquarium? Was it just interest? Was it to not get out of the mornings, but to change that lifestyle? Because that's got to be hard.
It was really about health.
Yeah.
Again, I was tired all the time, and I felt like I was having some short-term memory problems because of a lack of sleep. I would go home and take a nap in the afternoon for a couple hours and then get up and go to bed at 7:30, wake up at 1:30 because I was in the station by 3. And I felt like I needed to be in there that early because I wanted to do things right. I wanted to be able to go through all the data and prepare an accurate forecast. So, and those are on the days when it's sunny.
Yeah.
When it's stormy, those days get.
You may never have gone home if there was a storm system come through.
There were 1 or 2 times when, you were on the clock. No different than a lineman or, a power crew company. Those guys work through the night, through the day, and sometimes through the next day, to get your power back on when there's a big storm that goes through. And Sandy's brother was a lineman, so and her dad was a tree trimmer, so I was very familiar with the guys who would go out and clean up after the storm. But so I just sort of, what is the next option? And public relations was sort of adjacent to journalism and storytelling. So I was looking for quite some time, just kind of quietly keeping my ear to the ground. And when I found out that there was an opening at the aquarium, I thought, this is great because it's something that I feel passionately about and was already, connected to. And I was very grateful that, Cindy Todd and Charlie Arant gave me a shot. And, when I went in for the interview, after we were just wrapping up, and Charlie said, "Let me ask you one more question. Do you think you can have fun here?" And I said, "Absolutely." And it's a great place. There are so many talented people at the aquarium. I've been there 19 years, and I'm one of the newcomers. There are people that have been there 20 years plus. We've got about a dozen people, I think, that are 25 and up, and we've got several that have been there for 30 plus.
Yeah.
And these are all incredibly intelligent and talented people that could go to work in a lot of places, but they have chosen to stay there. And I think that speaks volumes about the culture and about the organization.
What is the most fulfilling thing for you at the aquarium? Is it the educational aspect? Is it the public facing position that you have?
Well, I think for me personally, and I think for a lot of folks, it's the mission. I think that we have the opportunity to help people better understand the world around us and then invite them to participate in making the world a better place. We benefit today from a lot of the protections that were put in place 50 years ago, the Clean Water Act, the Clean Air Act, the EPA. And so having a river that we can have Ironman in and not have to worry about the health of the athletes. If you look at the last 2 Olympics, there have been water concerns in Paris. Yeah. There were water concerns in Rio, and those were very real concerns. Paris spent a truckload of money to try to clean up that river to a point where it would be safe for the athletes. And, there was a lot of news coverage about, how much that was spent on that effort just for the Olympics. Now, when you think about, ounce of prevention versus a pound of cure, that's what we're trying to do with lake sturgeon. Those animals were extirpated or made extinct in this part of their historic range. And, this will be the 25th year of us reintroducing lake sturgeon to the Tennessee River. The water quality is good enough that they're thriving throughout the entire watershed. And that's good for us because it's our drinking water. But it's also telling that, because of the mistakes of the past, we have had to work with our partners very diligently and spend a lot of time, energy, and expertise to try to rebuild that population, to restore a portion of the ecological web of life to a point where the whole ecosystem thrives. And we benefit from that because healthy communities depend on healthy rivers. So I think for myself and for everybody at the aquarium, it's really about helping people understand the world around them and, again, inviting them to make a difference with us.
Well, I think you bring up an important point of the ounce of prevention and a lot of those rules and regulations that have been in place, since the late 60s, early 70s, EPA and things like that, that are under the microscope right now, quite frankly.
And we take those privileges for granted.
Yes.
We take clean water for granted here in the Southeast, which is home to this incredible diversity of aquatic life. We have more mussels, more salamanders, more turtles, more freshwater fishes, and more salamanders than most temperate zones in the world. And as residents, you have to travel somewhere else where it's drier and, it's not as green. If you live in West Texas, it's flat, brown, and dry. And you come here and it's lush and beautiful. And I think sometimes residents take that for granted.
I think you're absolutely right. It's around you all the time, and you just become numb to it. You don't realize that you go to somewhere like West Texas or anywhere else, and it's not nearly as pretty, not nearly as inviting.
Yeah, and I think people do appreciate the resources, but they don't think about them on a daily basis. And it was interesting just coming into work today and seeing how many people were jogging and walking along the riverfront and enjoying the Riverwalk, and appreciating nature even on that scale is helpful. If you can become connected to nature and start thinking about, the trash that's going to wash off of the parking lot that will end up in the stream, that will end up in the ocean, and, create problems all the way through that. It's a cascading effect. So we have a great responsibility, and we have fun telling stories that help open people's minds to ways that they can make the planet a better place to live.
I want to get to a couple things before we run out of time. And one of them is you've been at the aquarium 19 years now?
Coming up 19
years. So you've seen a lot, everything from COVID shutting it down to the addition of the saltwater aquarium. What have been those milestones or toughest things to face over that 19 years?
Well, certainly the pandemic. And I think that hopefully people sort of who were new to the area, and we have a lot of people who have either grown up with the aquarium always being present on the riverfront, or are new to the area and didn't know Chattanooga before the aquarium. My first trip to Chattanooga was in '88, I think. And I remember going across the Market Street Bridge with my friend Steve and saying, it's a shame the downtown looks like this because the area is so beautiful. When I came back from my interview and had lunch with Bill Wallace over at Fridays, I was like, wow, where did this all come from? And it was a result of the aquarium opening. And when Dennis Carmichael, the landscape architect, came back for the aquarium's 25th anniversary, he had a big smile on his face because all the trees were mature. And he said, a lot of businesses, when they hire a landscape architect, they don't realize that the trees start off like this and they don't look like they do in the renderings until some time goes by. So there is sort of that, old saying about when's the best time to plant a tree. And that's 30 years ago because you can enjoy the shade today. But the second best time is today.
Yeah.
And I think that applies to a lot of the conservation work that we're doing. We're working to save the Laurel Dace, and we're working with landowners to help them improve their agricultural practices that improves the water quality for the fish. And oh, by the way, that's where our drinking water starts up on the ridges and comes down into the main stem rivers. So it's helping all of that. And as a grandparent now, I'd like to think that, we're planting those trees through our conservation work that my grandchildren are going to benefit. I probably won't see the results of a better place 30 years from now, but they will.
But isn't it more important at this stage of life that they will?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I've tried to, Sandy and I try to get them out in nature and get them to appreciate things, and they do. And so it's fun to, because my parents were older when I came along, my grandparents were older, and I didn't have much opportunity to get to know them. But I think we have an opportunity to, connect them to nature and hopefully plant some seeds that they'll carry on to their kids.
The aquarium is very much like that tree you're talking about. Yeah, the best time to plant that aquarium was 30 years ago. And fortunately, we did.
Yeah.
But starting today wouldn't be bad either. And that leads to, some of the change. The aquarium's always evolving, looking at its mission and saying, are we still meeting the mission? What else do we need to do?
Yeah. And we're going through a fun process right now where, what does the next 30 years look like? And, with Andy Wood, our new CEO, we've got a tremendous amount of opportunities ahead of us. And I think that as exciting and as fruitful as the past 33 years have been, if the community continues to broadly support the aquarium as it has in the past, the next 30 years are going to be even more impactful. It's interesting, Mike. I tell people that the original investment for the River Journey building was $45 million. For the Ocean Journey building, it was $30. So $75 million in construction costs, but we're getting $187 million in annual economic benefit from the aquarium being here. And back to the pandemic, we sort of saw Chattanooga as it was before the aquarium because there was nothing happening in downtown. Yeah. Everything was quiet. And the first time that Mellow Mushroom was open, I went over there to have lunch to support the staff that had been out for a while. There was only one other person that was sitting there down the way from me as I was having my salad. And the guy said, how's it been? And she said, when the aquarium shut down, it killed us. And it really, hit me hard because you realize that there are so many people in the community that benefit from the tourism dollars that come in. And, that wasn't really the main driver for building the aquarium. It was really to enhance life for Chattanoogans and to stop the brain drain. Let's keep our bright, talented people here rather than leaving for opportunity elsewhere.
And it's all those ancillary benefits.
And now look at how many startup companies, we've got bright people moving here. Yeah. And so this is just, it's a great community. Sandy and I have, sort of pinched ourselves almost every day because we have a very giving community. We have a very caring community. And when I look around the country, and I've had the opportunity to travel a lot of places and they're fun to visit, but there's no other place, honestly, that I would rather be than here in Chattanooga. And we've both lived here longer than we have anywhere else.
And your story, the theme fits with me and a number of people we've spoken to on here that you start out in Chattanooga, not sure how long you're going to be there, and now you can't be drug away. Yeah. I could talk about this all day with you, but I am running out of time. So before I get to my last question, I want to remind listeners who makes all of this possible, and it's thank you to the Tennessee Valley Authority for sponsoring My Morning Cup. Follow TVA on social media to learn more about its multifaceted mission of service, and visit TVA.com/do good here to explore exciting TVA career opportunities. All right, last question. What would you tell that 25-year-old Thom Benson is important for a happy life?
Two things. I think finding good mentors. I have a debt of gratitude that I cannot repay to the folks who helped inspire me, to guide me, to help shape my career path and all along the way. And also sort of take time to enjoy life. I think that I've had conversations recently with my wife and, I know I missed things because I was so focused on the TV aspect of it and chasing breaking news and being there for storm duty and all kinds of things. But, she reassured me that, Misty never has commented that, you were an absentee father. And we, I'm grateful for that, but I wish I would have spent a little more time along the way.
Yeah, I think we all do that. And we were talking about that a little bit earlier, that that drive and ambition you have in your 40s, by the time you get to your 60s, you start to look at it as, I did miss some things. And even though your kids might not say, you missed that or this or that, there are those regrets.
Yeah, and I think it's fuel for the thought and mindset of what can I do with the rest of my time? Yeah. How can I have as big an impact as possible and be a positive force for good? And, that's sort of where I'm at right now. Like, what can I do to serve the aquarium? What can I do to serve my team? What can I do to serve my family?
Well, and I've had the pleasure of knowing you a while, Thom, and you always go out with that attitude of a servant leadership mentality, and Chattanooga's lucky to have you.
Thank you.
And I appreciate you coming in and talking to us today.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for listening to My Morning Cup, a podcast by Costa Media Advisors. If you like this episode, please share it with a friend. I release a new episode each week, so be sure to subscribe on Spotify, Apple, Google, or wherever you listen to podcasts.